Hi, everybody. Welcome to Sotheby's Institute of Art, New York. I am Christine Kuan, Director and CEO of Sotheby's Institute, New York. So we are super delighted you're all here. We can't believe how many of you are here in the middle of summer. And I am extremely excited to introduce our panel tonight for 4 Under 40, which is a new series featuring young professionals at the top of the art market. And tonight I am delighted to welcome, I will have to read off everybody's titles because they're so impressive. Alia Williams, Director at Jeffrey Deitch. Isabel Suarez, Sales Director at Leon Tover Gallery. And Josh Campbell, Director of Strategic Partnerships at Eazel. And Maxime Melkebeke, Associate Director at Salon 94. So welcome all, and welcome all to everybody who's watching on Facebook Live. This is super exciting. We are going to just have a casual conversation about what made these amazing young people so successful, and then we're going to open it up for Q&A. So you'll all have a chance to ask your questions. I know many of you have a lot of questions. I wanted to start with something really basic, and I would really like to know about each of my guest panelists' backgrounds. And I wanted to start with a question of where are you from? Because they're not all from New York City. So let's start with Josh.
Hi. So I grew up in Overland Park, Kansas, actually. It's the Midwest. And I had come from a family where my grandparents were pretty big art collectors, so, you know, kind of grew up around the arts. And then went to school in Texas and studied at Trinity University in San Antonio. And I was a studio art, art history, and business triple major. And then when I was there, I was, that's really when I started working in the arts, first with a museum, in their education department at the McNay Art Museum, which was awesome because I, helped them build out programs that engage children and teens and new families and how to participate in the, contemporary arts, ongoing program. And then after that was with a awesome art consultant who ran a firm that dealt primarily with large public collections, specifically hospitals. So I got to help build 2 new hospitals that we built from the ground up, like 1 million square feet each, and we created a state initiative where we got taxpayer funds to fill each location with artwork. So we get to place over 1,500 works, from emerging to blue chip in both spaces, and it was just awesome. And then from there, I came to New York for Sotheby's art business program. It seemed like the natural fit from being art and studio art and art history and business double or triple to the art business masters. And from New York, things just took off from there. So that's pretty much how I got here.
That was great. Thank you. That's awesome. Alia, where are you from?
Yeah, so I'm originally from Chicago, and the art scene in Chicago is pretty emerging. I was more involved in making art, and so I grew up making art. I was a student at this nonprofit called Marwin. They have free art classes for anyone that applies, and so I did that from elementary school through high school. And then when applying to college, I was trying to figure out whether or not I wanted to go the studio art route or something a little bit more academic and art historical. And I decided to get my bachelor's degree in art history, and I went to University of Illinois in downstate Illinois. There, the art history program is very much rooted in history. They really don't talk about contemporary art that much, and so in figuring out what further education I wanted, I really wanted something that focused on contemporary art. I took maybe one contemporary art class in undergrad, and that just blew my mind. And so I was doing some research on contemporary art master's programs, and specifically I need something that connected business with the arts, because I knew that instead of being an artist, I wanted to promote artists this was their main career, this was their calling. So I applied to Sotheby's Institute in New York, got in, and I was able to really intern with amazing people and meet amazing people, and that kind of led to the position that I am in now, which I assume we'll talk about later.
Yeah, we will. And Isabel, where are you from?
I'm from Miami, Florida, so I was born and raised in Miami, and I would say my first foray into art was through Cuban art. My parents are Cuban, so that was kind of my first step into art, and this was Miami pre-Basel years. So, but then obviously the art market there has grown exponentially. And then I went to school in Texas also. I went to the University of Texas in Austin, and while I was there, I was an art history major, but I also was a Latin American studies major. So that kind of combination of the two really led me to this like passion of art from the region of Latin America. And after I graduated, I applied for the Master's in Art Business program here, and I just thought it was the perfect continuation to what I had already learned and to helping me mold that into a career. And from there, I've been in New York and working in this field, and that's where everything took off from there.
That's great. Thank you so much. So all three of you are from the U.S. I'm really delighted that Maxime could be here tonight. Maxime actually just flew in from Art Basel, so I'm so glad you're still awake. And if you could tell us a little bit about your background and where you're from.
I'm from Belgium, grew up in a small town called Leuven, studied in Brussels, studied business because my parents didn't want me to study art history. They were sort of like, what are you going to do with that? So after a sort of period when studying management, having a job, I sort of saw a lack of creative space for contemporary art in the city I was living in. So I started a pop-up gallery showing contemporary artists of like Belgian nature, but that had like a nice, like that were famous sort of like Luc Tuymans, Michael Bormans, Raoul de Keyser, and I was combining them with younger artists, sort of trying to brand them a little bit. It was like a 10-day exhibition. It was a huge success, so we planned a second pop-up exhibition. After that second exhibition, the museum wanted to participate. The journalists were asking me questions, and I was like, wow, it looks like I need some art historical background. So I quit my job. I went to Sotheby's London for a semester program, and I thought, oh, this is a 6-month tryout. We'll see what I do after that. After those 6 months, I was like, well, now I have to either go back to the old job I had or take a leap. And so I was offered a job at a gallery in Belgium, and I also applied at Sotheby's Institute in New York. So they accepted me, so I was like, well, this is a one-time chance to go live in New York, and if I can't try it there, or if I don't succeed there, well, we can always go somewhere else, because to me, New York was the center stage of the contemporary art world. So I got here, interned for Christie's at the post-war and contemporary department in my second semester. That was great, super experience. Had to write a thesis, but I also had to make money, so I had to find a job. So by chance, I found a job at Skarstedt that I did for 2 years, and then I transitioned into the position I'm now. So that's sort of it.
That's great. That's a lot. All of it. For all of you, it's a lot. One of the things that I think everyone in the audience has a question about, and I think for a lot of us, when we first studied art, it was in an art history context. And a lot of young people who are thinking about working in the art world, they really think about studying art history and getting an advanced degree in art history. I wanted to ask all of you, what drew you to working in the art market? Because all of you are in leading positions at sort of top galleries and top businesses in the art world. How did you know that you didn't want to become, for example, a professor in art history or an artist? When did you make that decision, and how did you become interested in working in the art world? Let's start with Alia, because you talked about art history in your background too.
Yeah, so I knew very early on, even when I was in like elementary school and high school that I did not want to be an artist. And maybe, I mean, now in retrospect, maybe I just like wasn't confident enough in my artwork to make that decision, but I just knew that I didn't want to be an artist, and that there were people that I'd taken classes with and people that I would go to museums and galleries and see and be very impressed that, wow, this is what their career is, and this is just what that person wants to do over absolutely anything else, and I'm not like that. So I'm just going to be realistic with myself, and instead of pretending to be something that I know I'm not, I want to promote these people. And I still want to be involved in the arts, but be involved in selling their work and be involved in putting them into shows and presenting their work to other audiences that wouldn't necessarily know their work. Same thing kind of along the lines of being a professor, or continuing on the academic path. That just also wasn't for me. Just teaching isn't something that was particularly my calling. And so I actually went through Sotheby's Institute and interned at many places in New York trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And funny enough that I ended up working at a gallery when starting Sotheby's Institute. I was like, no galleries, absolutely not. I don't want to be a gallery assistant. I don't want to, like, the stereotype is that you work for very little pay and do a lot of work, which is actually not much of a stereotype. That's actually real.
Yeah, it's just the truth.
It's just the truth. And then here I am, and I ended up at a gallery, and I absolutely love it. So you never know, but I think that if you know in your heart that you're doing something, or that you know that there are certain paths that you don't want to take, then you can still explore them. But for me, I just knew that those weren't my paths.
Isabel, what about you?
Well, I think after that one studio class I took, artist was definitely ruled out. But I think for me, what drew me to the art market was definitely the dynamism within the market. I think there's so many sectors of the market that when you're at Sotheby's Institute, as much as you learn, when you actually start working in there, you realize all these different facets and all the ways you can be creative about your career. And in the different roles I've had, both at the auction house and at galleries, I've just realized that there's so much space that you can carve out for yourself if you just kind of think outside of the box. And I think that initially when I was graduating from undergrad and deciding to apply to the program, I think the idea of working in a really dynamic, fast-paced environment was what drew me to the market, like a really exciting place. It's not exciting every single day, but for the most part, yeah.
Right. And I think for you, Max, and also for you, Josh, I mean, you both had business backgrounds already. How did you know that it was the art market and not like investment banking that you wanted to go into? Can you talk a little bit about that? And let's start with Max.
I think it's just general interest. It just drew me. Like what I would do on my free time was so concentrated in art or visiting museums or galleries that I was naturally drawn to it rather than say, I don't know, investment banking or healthcare or anything like that. So felt
What about
natural.
you, Josh?
I always had I really enjoy business and like finance and econ especially, and I feel like you could apply that to any industry. And I guess I was fortunate to have parents that were really encouraging of, you could do anything, so try and work in a field that you really love. And I, at the time, I've always really enjoyed the art world. And it's funny you said the teaching route, because I would love to one day, go back and maybe teach. But I, was really fascinated with the intersection of like art and technology right now and the potential for, online education. And so I really thought, the right way to maybe impact or educate, the general public on like the widest scale would be to move into the art education technology space. I'm still working with art directly. That's amazing. Every day I get to go and talk with galleries, see works in person. And at the same time, I still can deal with the business side and the planning, development. All the like the go-to-market strategies, which I think is a little more fun to have those types of brainstorming meetings and planning sessions when you're actually excited about the programming and the milestones you hope to achieve and hit, all falling under this umbrella of we are educating people, which I think is at the end of the day just kind of great.
It is really great. And one of the things I know everyone in the audience is really interested in is a lot of us are already working in the art world. I remember in my first job, it was in the art world, it was at the Metropolitan Museum. It was $12,000 to work full time for a year. And the story is really like, you can't really ascend in the art world. A lot of these positions, chief curator, a lot of these positions, nobody ever leaves those positions. So at such a young age, all of you have made it to director level positions in a very, very short amount of time. Can you talk about how you navigated the career development process and how you got yourself to this director level position? And we can start with anybody. Alia, actually, I want to start with you because you were just on a panel here a few months ago and you were an assistant at Jeffrey Deitch Gallery and now you're director. So how did that happen?
Well, it's really great when you work for a very, very small gallery. You can make huge jumps. The gallery, I work for Jeffrey Deitch. He was a former director or the former owner of Deitch Projects, which was extremely important to the New York art market in the 80s and 90s and early thousands and really promoted a lot of emerging artists. And so when I was after I graduated from Sotheby's Institute, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do and was jumping around a lot of different places. I worked for Art Production Fund, which is a nonprofit that works and promotes public art. I also worked for Sotheby's, the auction house, for a little bit. And then I also worked for an art fair. So I got to see a lot of different facets of the art world and kind of like make Venn diagrams of what I liked, what I didn't like. And that helped me narrow down that I wanted a mentor and I wanted to work for someone who's worn many different hats in the art world, who is extremely knowledgeable, who is just a genuinely wonderful person and also has incredible influence on the art world because he's like the godfather of the art world, to be honest. And so when I was at Armory Show about a little over a year ago, I saw him sitting in his booth, which is incredible because you never ever see people whose names are on the booth sign actually sitting in the booth. You never see like Larry Gagosian sitting in the booth. So I went up to him and said, this is an absolutely incredible presentation. They were presenting the Florine Stettheimer Collapse Time Salon, which Florine Stettheimer had a salon style like grouping of artists and curators and writers, and they would just gather in her home and they talk about art, very much like Gertrude Stein. And so I went up to him and was just like, this is an amazing presentation. I just wanted to say thank you so much for putting this on. And he immediately got up and asked me about my background and who I was, and we started chatting a little bit. And it just so happened that his assistant was moving on to a part-time position and going to grad school, and he needed someone to work at his gallery. And I was just like, yeah, obviously I'm interested. And so shortly after that, I officially started at the gallery and working in a really, really small organization. We have about 5 people working, excluding Jeffrey. You get to do everything. And I mean, from mailing out packages to organizing exhibition programming. And like when I say organizing an exhibition, I mean everything to do with that. Shipping, sales, logistics, liaising with artists. You do absolutely everything. And in that, I was able to gain such incredible experience and be able to have a lot more opportunities in the sales and artist liaison route, which is what I'm very, very interested in. And so through that, Jeffrey promoted me to Director New York, and he's also opening another gallery in LA at the end of September. So we're going to be expanding a lot more. And so, I mean, essentially I was just able to make a big jump because it was a really small organization, and I handle all exhibitions and like secondary market sales and help Jeffrey doing that.
I think that's a really modest way to put it, but that's great. I love that. Max, you and I were talking earlier just before we came up here, and I was saying, everybody can get an entry-level job in the art world, and you were actually saying it's really not that easy. I would really like you to talk a bit about being an international student and also going from grad school to landing a director level position at one of the hottest galleries, Salon 94, which is an international gallery. Jeannie Greenberg is like really, really renowned in all the contemporary art circles. So can you talk a little bit about how you got this position?
Yeah, I think after Skarstedt, I was sort of, I literally hit the ceiling, even though it was also a small gallery. They're fully staffed with directors, and if the director is not moving on, there's no room for other directors. And I really wanted to step up to the next level. So I started looking around. As you said, there's a lot of entry-level positions, so it was usually director's assistant here, director's assistant there. I was lucky enough with the little background I had or experience I had at Skarstedt that I would actually be invited for an interview, which on my first search for a job in New York was like, oh, you're international, it's gonna get too messy, you don't have a visa or anything. So so I had a visa this time, so that was already good. But then they said they look at your profile, and as I sort of met my mentor in a little way that was helping me finding the right job or the right position. So through her and her connections, I sort of was able to interview for a little higher level positions, which was sort of essential to actually be able to interview for a director's position or associate director's position. And yeah, 3, 4, 5, 6 meetings later, I got the call, you got the job. So
Only 6 meetings, that's great.
I mean,
That's
Yeah,
there's-
that makes sense.
yeah. I mean,
Take notes, everyone, yeah.
Some galleries end up interviewing you forever, and it's sort of about you making a choice then, I feel. But
And what about you, Isabel? Also in the gallery realm, how did you become sales director? That's a really tough job. You're interfacing with clients, collectors. Can you talk a little bit about how you did that?
I started my career at Philips, which was possibly the best training you could have in a sales role, is to be working hands-on at an auction house. I was the department administrator for the Latin America department. So everything that you don't want to do, all of the calls, fact sheets that you send, runner that you keep, I did that, and it was honestly the best training I could have ever hoped for in this field and in a sales role. I had a wonderful mentor as well, who is still a dear friend, and we work closely together at the gallery. And I think, to your point, my role at Leon Tover really came organically, and it's been a really nice process because I worked with the gallery when I worked at Philips, and there comes a point where you do hit a ceiling in your job in these entry-level positions, and like any big gallery, an auction house is very corporate, so unless somebody above you leaves, you're not going to get the position. And it's kind of when you internalize that it's okay to kind of not necessarily follow that straight line and move from admin to cataloger to associate specialist to specialist, and you can kind of make your own path by going somewhere else, you really start to kind of take a little more control, I think. And I was introduced to the gallery coordinator at Leon Tover through the former director of the gallery, who now has her own space. And we just started a very natural conversation. I was living in Miami at the time, working for another gallery, and I had wanted to move back to New York. And it was just it was a really organic way to do it. We had met, but we didn't really know each other. And I came to New York. We had an all-day interview basically. I went to both gallery spaces, and we just kind of talked about what he wanted for the future of the gallery and what I could bring to that, and my ideas as well. And it was just very organic, and I think that that's why it's been such a smooth transition.
That's really great. I also wanted to talk about, Josh, your experience as an entrepreneur. I used to work at Artsy. Many of you know that. I was chief curator and director of strategic partnerships. The technology space is really hot, but it's also extremely competitive. Josh, can you talk about being co-founder of Canvas Collective, which now recently has been acquired by Eazel, and that has a tremendous success story itself as a company. Can you talk about working in the tech space so quickly out of grad school?
Yeah, no, so that was not expected by any means. Really, I think how I got there was when I came to New York, I really thought, this is, as was stated earlier, like the center stage for the contemporary art world. And so I was really, wanting to take as full advantage of that as possible. And so, when I'm, fresh off the boat here, pretty much from Texas, I just started going to as many openings, meeting as many artists, gallerists, really, all taking advantage of a lot of the events that Sotheby's provided, and then really put forth the effort to, follow up to the point where when I would have these, new connections, if anyone needed help with something last minute, I would always say yes. So, I've done a couple auctions because I knew directors who needed to fill spot. So I've done everything from literally being this, the stand in the room, helping show and display, answering questions, to working art fairs, to helping, artists develop business plans for artist-run gallery spaces in the Lower East Side in Brooklyn, helping curate pop-up shows. And just through that and keeping up, I really, kind of built a really great network, mostly based here in New York. And then when I was when I was at the Institute, I did my, final writing project thesis paper on art education in the technology space, really stemming from, we've kind of seen this, invasion of apps using, predictive algorithms to define taste, especially in our sister industries, so like music and film. So, like all started with like YouTube, you watch something and then recommended next video, Netflix, what's playing next. All the internet radios, you basically don't even have to choose what you're going to listen to. It's just going to be provided for you. And so I was posing the question, is like, would we see something maybe like this enter the art world? And the art world is so unique because each piece, resonates differently with, different people for, different reasons. It's a very emotional engagement. And so kind of exploring that, I kind of, within the paper argued that we may not see something like that, but if we were to see kind of the tech feel space, especially like the app space, move into the art, what, would be successful? So then, I analyzed just basic critiques of the art market, where, the problems lie. A lot of it's stemming from the asymmetry of information. It's quite intimidating if you don't come from, an art background. People might feel intimidated to even engage with art on, going to a museum or a gallery. As well as, there was a big problem I noticed in social media. So it kind of came out of nowhere and has really impacted the art world. And one of the things that really just kind of surprised me and set the tone for the founding of Canvas was I came across this statistic that, on average, about 3 billion photos are shared every day online onto a social media account. And roughly 85, and some argue as high as 90% of those posts don't carry any source reference to what's being posted, which makes sense if you think about how social media evolved over, the selfies, the food pictures, but it's really, kind of ingratiated itself within the art world. And what that means is anytime someone's posting, that and no attribution is attached, that defeats all marketing initiatives by any artist or art venue, or worse, people are then mistagging things, which spreads misinformation and, ultimately leads to a dilution of the entire, experience. And so kind of taking that and realizing, well, how can you create something that would, one, engage the general public or anyone with any type of interest in art, but have maybe felt, unable to participate or engage? How do I put something in their hands that would then allow them that freedom to explore? And I co-founded a startup called Canvas Collective, which we, built it as a free, art education social media platform. So basically it utilized image recognition technology to really act as like a Shazam for art. So you'd be able to photograph a work, it would, recognize it if it's in the database, pull up the venue provided, high-res image, along with all of the appropriate attributable info and nothing sensitive. So like price and really provenance up to the discretion of the uploading party, meaning we could have everything from public domain works to like the most contemporary works you would see in Chelsea right now. And it was free for people to join and free for people to use. And then if anything was ever shared through the app, be it a selfie of us or the image retrieved upon discovery, it would automatically tag the title of the work, the artist's name, and the displaying venue onto all other platforms, be it, social media or text and email, to really, kind of solve that problem that I thought was, pretty significant. And so from there, it really, grew out. We actually never went live. We were always in beta and partnering with people. And then through that, I was presented with the opportunity after meeting with this other company that was doing VR space in the art world called Eazel at the time. And, our paths led together, the stars aligned, and me and my other co-founder were presented with an opportunity to join the Eazel team, who was a little bit farther along than we were in terms of just infrastructure, traction, fundraising. And so we were able to then kind of join and still create, the concept for Canvas, but now under this new umbrella with the AR app that we're going to be putting forth. And really, I got involved with both of those from the network I had established, just going out and participating in the art world here in New York.
So let's segue into the New York art scene, because all of you have been really successful within New York. Tell me about your experience working here, living here. What is it like? You're not from New York City, none of you. What do you love about working here and living here? Isabel, start with you.
So many things.
From Miami.
Winter, obviously. I think that, like I said before, just there's so much going on. It's such a dynamic place, and having worked in Miami for a year, that art scene is still, there is definitely an art scene, but it's still very much emerging, and it's not at the level of New York at all. I really missed going to all these openings and being just immersed in the center of it. And I think that what everyone is saying is, they were able to make these incredible connections and get to where they are because they just went and did things. Went to openings, met people. Really, that's such an important part of being in the New York art world, is kind of just going out there and introducing yourself to people and meeting people. And I think it's a camaraderie, it really is. And I think that even people that I worked with at Phillips are still some of my closest friends. And it is really a camaraderie that you feel here when you work in the art world that you don't really get elsewhere, in my opinion.
I think that's interesting that you're speaking about camaraderie in New York City, because New York City is sometimes notorious for being kind of a tough city and kind of a cold city. Max, can you talk about coming from Belgium and you're still in New York? Obviously, you like being in New York, I assume, but can you talk a little bit about that transition and your experience of New York City?
I always knew I would live somewhere else than Belgium. Small, slow. I tried London. It was nice. I always thought I would live in LA, but still hasn't happened. Landed here in New York, and I don't know. There's something with this city. It pulls you in. It spits you out. It's really it's sort of. I feel like it's pushing me every day to do things I thought I would never do or could never achieve, or it just, it gives me this energy to try things in a different, more creative way, rather than, I would just do it this way because that's what everyone's telling me to do. So yes, I feel like the thing that New York has taught me is the hustle.
Yes.
Yeah.
The New York hustle. You just use your elbows and move around.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do agree that there's a large amount of community building involved, especially on the lower level. But then once you get to the higher level, I need to watch out for daggers being.
Well, to your point about the hustle, especially when you work in sales in the art market in New York, there's so much competition. So you really have to get creative about how you're gonna sell and how you're gonna one up. You go to a fair and it's like everybody has the most amazing booth. So that element of the hustle is very much well and alive.
Yeah. And I really think that it is just, in New York, it is what you make of it. If you are not if you're just like not very ambitious, or you're just not interested in putting yourself out there, then you won't have the kind of opportunities sometimes that just fall in your lap that someone else who is making connections and grabbing coffee with people and saying that they're available for everything. You're not going to have those same kind of opportunities. And there are sometimes really, really amazing opportunities, and you never know who is connected to who. Part of the reason why I think that I was really honored to be offered the position that I'm in now is that the place that I interned at for free for 9 months was our production fund. And they were just really, really amazing people, and I absolutely loved working with them. Their former office was across the street from my gallery, and they had been there for 15 years. They knew Jeffrey very, very well, and so him seeing that on my resume was like, oh my gosh, she had worked for them. That's a kind of a pre-qualifier. Like, I know where she's coming from, and I know that she is a hard worker. So you really never know. You always have to, I just say, take advantage of as many opportunities as possible, because there are not as many places in the world where you are constantly able to meet incredible people and have just as many opportunities as you can. Sometimes there are too many and you can't even take advantage of all of them.
And what about the tech space in New York? Because I think everybody knows Silicon Valley is notorious for being sort of the startup central. What is the outlook for startups in New York City?
Actually, the tech space is quite large here in New York. You know, I was obviously very novice moving into it when I did, thinking everything was Silicon Valley. I mean, we had offices in Los Angeles, they call it Silicon Beach, Playa del Rey, But no, New York is huge, and especially when it comes to like the finance world right now, everybody, I guess in finances, there are a couple big trends are impact investment. So, you know, a lot of family offices and funds are moving into, you know, non-monetary returns, and a lot of people in recent, you know, surprises me because I think it's always been the case, but they're now paying attention to art as, you know, a real vehicle of asset diversification, especially in terms of, you know, how tumultuous global economies can be. It's a safe store of value. So if, you know, U.S. dips a bit, you can still sell something or keep it in Hong Kong, or free ports are awesome. And so because of that, a lot of startups, I know, and a lot of like new family offices kind of geared towards investment within the tech space. New York has become a real hub for that, which is, you know, growing a lot of, you know, technological infrastructure, especially, you know, Google's here now. They've got their headquarters, so it's actually a lot larger than I was expecting, which is great because as convenient as that is, I have to go off, you know, what they were talking about, how it's New York. You know, it's awesome not having a car. You can walk. You can go to like 4 or 5 events in one night. Like, you can't do that in LA by any means. You're going to be driving. And so, you know, I think everyone says, you know, 70, if not 80% of, you know, business in the art world happens in the social environment. And I think a lot of that's true when it comes to like fundraising, especially in the tech world. And so to have both environments always going here in Manhattan, you know, you couldn't ask for a better space.
That's great. You know, I think we're going to wind up with 2 more questions and then open it up to everybody here, so get your questions ready. I would like to ask each of you one piece of advice you would give to someone who is starting out and looking for a career in the art world. What's your tip for success working? I'm not talking about education, but like, how did you succeed in your roles, and what's your advice? So why don't we, who would like to start?
I'll take it.
Oh, you're taking?
Yeah.
You go ahead.
One is never give up, and the other one, it's sort of my motto is, or should be everyone's motto in the art world, is just make it happen. Don't ask questions.
Yeah.
Just do it. Just make it happen.
Yeah, mine was going to be ask for what you want.
Yeah.
Because no one is going to give you. People can't read your mind. They're not going to give you something that you don't ask for. And also just to keep your goal in mind. Sometimes you'll feel like you're going on a different path, or that you're doing something that you think that you're overqualified for or underqualified for, but just keep in mind that it's a ladder and it's a process, and so you will eventually get to whatever you're working towards.
Yeah, to add to that, I would say that the most important thing for me is to be a perennial student. Like, you really learn the most when you leave the classroom. And I have been so fortunate to work with Leon, who is so generous with his knowledge and really wants, to teach me. And I just learn from watching him, from watching himself, from watching him, put exhibitions together, from everything, just operating the gallery. And I think that if you surround yourself with great mentors and you just learn from people and kind of keep an open mind, that just because you're necessarily in a high position, you've stopped learning, that's definitely not the case. I mean, there's so much to be learned, and there's so many talented, successful people in this industry that are willing to mentor you.
Josh, your advice?
I would say don't be afraid to ask for help. Kind of going off of just do it if you're assigned something. Do it to your best of ability, and if it's not what someone's looking for, don't take it personally and just use it as, okay, what do you guys want and how to grow? Like, nothing should be negative. If a failure, it's great because then you know not to do that again, and it's just an improvement. So yeah, just kind of going off, just do it, and then don't be afraid to ask for help, because finding a mentor, asking everybody who you might be all your peers have all probably been in the same space you were at one point, and it's not as scary as you might think. So just get out of your own head, do it, ask for help, and things usually work out.
I also feel like that never ends. Like, no matter what fancy title that you get, you're constantly a student. You're constantly learning and knowing what to do and what not. So it's something to always keep in mind.
Okay, so this is my last question. What is the favorite thing about your current job? So Josh, I'll start with you.
Two, I'd say. One, the fact that I get to continue interfacing directly with artists and art venues in like my day-to-day, and I just love that because I think nothing beats actually getting in front of a work of art in person, and then like especially with the artists or the venue, like I love that. And then two, I really enjoy. I've got interns now, so that's great. I mean, they're awesome. And because I myself was an intern, for not too long ago, and so it really shows that if you just put the hard work in, it all comes around, and so yeah, that's pretty fun.
Alia, your favorite thing about your job?
I guess also jumping off of what Josh said, I really love to work with art every day, which you'll find that there are some positions in your world where you aren't able to do that. So I'm very, very fortunate to be able to do that, and to be able to work with amazing, talented, living artists and artist estates, and be able to advocate for them. I'm just extremely honored to even be in that position and be able to just work with really incredible people and advocate for them in any way possible. And then also I love that I work so closely with Jeffrey. He has so much experience in the art world, so much knowledge about the inner workings of the art world and do's and don'ts. And so I feel like even just being in his presence and sitting in our tiny office with him every day, I'm able to learn so much that I wouldn't have the opportunity to take advantage of.
Isabel?
I would also definitely say, like, being around art all the time is incredible, because when you work at an auction house, sometimes you don't get to do that, and I love that about working at a gallery. And I would definitely say that I'm so fortunate to be working in the Latin American art market at this time, because there's been so much crossover. Now auction houses, Sotheby's has led the way for the integration of the Latin American art market into kind of the broader modern and contemporary art market, and kind of reintegrating it into the canon. And Leon has been such a champion of this for so long, and it's such a rewarding thing to be able to be working with him and learning from him at such an exciting time. So I would definitely say that getting to work so closely with him and just learning from him is really such a privilege.
Max, you're the last one.
Yeah, I was almost dozing off there. Sorry, guys. I think everything that you both said is very true. It's like very sort of the nature why you want to work at a gallery, or sort of like the amazing artists you're able to work with, the clients, all like the closeness you have towards the artwork that's in front of you. Those are mainly the things that wake me up in the morning. But I would also say sort of the respect you get once you get to this level, and sort of the autonomy and the responsibility that you carry right now is very important to me, as it sort of shows that the whole hard work you've done for those past years are finally paying off.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, so many years of hard work. Very impressive. No, we are very, very impressed. And now I would really like to invite all of you, if you have questions, just raise your hand. We have microphones. Just keep in mind we have people watching online, so if you could just speak into the mic, people online will be able to hear you. Yes?
Hi, my name is Eliza, and my question is for Josh. Josh, I was curious, for those of us who are interested in working somewhere amidst the intersection of art and technology, what do you see as being the kind of white space for skilled employees in that corner of the art market, and how can we use our time at Sotheby's to better prepare ourselves to be meaningful contributors in that area?
Oh, yeah, great question. I think really, I know within the tech space, a lot of the people you work with have heavy tech backgrounds, and so just the concept of the art world in general and how it operates, because it operates, pretty uniquely, unlike, other industries. You've got the different schools of thought on how you even approach art, if you should even talk about it being a commercial entity, or is it purely, just like a noble, intrinsically human, good. And so really understanding those nuances and then being able to translate that to people who might be thinking a little more in terms of black and white business and tech, like that, to me, I've been seeing a lot of other firms that have been trying to diversify into the art sector. Those are the people that they're looking for. Somebody who can come in and has the people skills to talk with, other professionals that have maybe zero experience or exposure to the art world, and effectively communicate how to then tailor those, their ideal business plans. They might have some idea or notion of what they think might be super successful, being from the outside looking in, but not really understanding how the world works. That idea might, go nowhere or something. And so I really think being able to understand just how the contemporary market operates, as well as the art historical like theories behind why things exist and operate the way they do, would set you apart of any other candidate who might just come in with maybe some minimal art experience. Maybe they were a gallery assistant, or a graphic designer who had like a studio art degree. Like those, from what I've been hearing, are like a lot of people are applying for that. And so it really, to separate you from the rest, it's being able to provide real context on how the industry actually operates, and how to then inform other programs without getting discouraged or put off. A lot of it falls back on people skills. So just being able to be that mediator between the two. And I think if you can do that, a lot of tech firms are trying to snatch those types of individuals up left and right. So.
Thank you for your question. Other questions? There's one in the back. You could just wait for the microphone. Thank you.
Well,
Hi.
hi, I'm Anne. I've just graduated from NYU. I'm also an international school student. I'm just wondering, I want to ask Maxime, do you find like for international students it is more difficult to get one job here because of visa?
I mean, the visa is just one barrier. Getting a job entry level in the art world in general, there are a lot of barriers. So it kind of depends what you're aiming for. Like, I will only work at David's Werner or an auction house, for example. Well, that's gonna limit your options and your choices. I think you can learn a lot by working for smaller entities where the barriers are lower, and garner a lot of important experience. Because you have to know that every job that gets posted on NIFI gets 300 emails or applications if you apply for a job at Werner or Pace, and then you need to get selected and be one of the 3 people that they actually interview. So that's like a heavy elimination process. I think if you can find a job where you can show that you have talents or experience that you can apply to that specific gallery, then I'm sure there's a conversation that you can have with them in regards to your status as an international student.
I also think, having worked at Artsy where we got 500 CVs a day for every position that we posted, it's a lot of volume, but not a lot of quality. So every employer in this city is still searching for excellence, and I think this panel shows that, you know, if you are excellent, you rise very quickly in the art world, because even though there are hundreds of people applying for these jobs, people are still looking for excellent employees, and that's really still something that's very rare. And so I think, you know, that gives hope to everybody who really is passionate about working in the art market. Yes, you had a question?
I have a question for Josh and maybe even Christine as well. What do you think are some of the newer technologies that you're seeing emerging? I mean, not necessarily newer technologies, but technology marrying up with art. So in other words, you have Artsy, you've got the firms that you're kind of getting art into education. Are you seeing other, what other kind of cool applications are you seeing out there in the, like I said, in the tech and art space?
I'll let you go ahead and start.
One of the really cool kind of things is the company I'm currently with, Eazel. So right now, like I said, we're primarily a VR company, and so what we do is we actually go into art environments, so museums, galleries, artist studios, public and private collections, and we've got really awesome, super expensive, like 360 cameras that we set up, and we can actually map everything to a very fine, granular detail, and then allow people who maybe don't have the opportunity to visit that space in person to go to the website and then our forthcoming app and virtually tour those spaces, for free. So it's really a way to drive user engagement in participating just at the most basic level of, viewing the artwork. And then building out the AR, we're going to be including like image recognition, similar to what I was talking about before, as well as ways, with other augmented reality tools. For instance, we're going to be partnering with art fairs, and art fairs can be kind of a mess to navigate. I feel like they just keep getting bigger and bigger. Especially if anyone went out and trekked the heat at Freeze on Rando's Island these past couple weeks. I think that thing went on forever. And so offering, a tool, so if you have a couple galleries in mind that you want to, see first, or notable works that, you've heard about, you'd be able to have an app then and be able to guide you directly there, instead of having to find and just, trying to figure out new ways to just really ease the process and make it more enticing. Some other really cool technology spaces that I've seen be moving into art is the actual artwork being embedded with, AR capabilities. So I've seen a couple artists who have done that with their large-scale paintings. So the painting will look like, really beautiful on the surface, and then you hold up an iPad, and it could be a totally different, interactive, moving space underneath that's only activated through looking through your, AR device, if you will. And then as well as, the totally immersive VR experiences with the Oculus, or where you put on a headset and you can really be, feel like as if you are there. And I know the big pushback with those types of applications right now is the kind of disorientation or, motion sickness that it can induce, because it's still quite new. And so there's a lot of really great companies figuring out how to really map eye movement within just how someone's looking and viewing at art, to then bake that into how they'll be able to navigate, so you would really be able to move as if you normally would, with any type of VR headset on. Again, allowing anyone who maybe not has the capability to visit something in person to experience it at the comfort of their home.
Great. Any other questions? Yes, here in the front.
Hi, this is a question for everybody. Basically, it's more of a personal question because I've completed my Bachelor in Business Administration and I'm now moving into my Master in Management. So I'm going this very like businessy path. And most of you have like a background in history of art. So I kind of have a dilemma because I don't know if I'm in a disadvantage because I don't have a background in history of art in entering the art market. What do you have to say? Like, do you think that I'm at a disadvantage, or do you see that there are other ways for me to enter the market without that kind of educational background?
I think just based off of what we were talking about with taking advantage of opportunities in New York, there's still so many gallery openings you can go to, museum openings, and so you can learn like the history of art and the art canon through that way. And also, I would consider taking advantage of internships in the art market. There are a lot of galleries and museums who are always, or not always hiring, but who are very interested in people with business backgrounds. And I think that by immersing yourself in the art market and just going to and seeing as many things as possible, then you would be able to still be a part of the art market.
Yeah, I definitely think that you can learn about like the entire history of Western art by going to the Metropolitan. So
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, there's so many opportunities in New York to learn about art. And while I did have an art history degree and I did take that path, most of the artists that I work with directly today, I learned about post-graduation. Like, it was all a process of really continuing my education. So reading, going to exhibitions, going to museums, and really just continuing to enrich your own knowledge. And I think that's definitely doable in New York, and if you have the passion to do it.
What about the two business majors? Any thoughts?
I mean, I think it adds value, both educations, either art history, but having seen that the sort of all galleries are sort of flooded with art historians or practicing artists or who have studied BFAs, MFAs. I think having a business background sets in a sort of sense of how you can run things or plan or organize or create budgets. So it keeps some of the more creative people in the gallery or in the business sort of like more with their feet on the ground and see how they can realize projects in different ways. So I don't think it's at a disadvantage. It all's going to depend on how much you're interested in the art of the gallery or of the museum. And most you can learn by looking. It's
so true.
You just keep looking at art and don't just like stand in front of a painting or sculpture for 30 seconds. Like, give it 15 minutes for once. Try to describe it. Try to like look around. Why is it positioned here and not somewhere else? You know, every element of a work of art is a deliberate choice made by this artist, and the position of every work is a deliberate choice made by a person. So if you start thinking about all these choices, you are learning yourself about these works, the placement, and the art world in general. So.
Great. Thank you. Well, if there are no more questions, I would like to thank the panelists for speaking with us tonight and sharing their amazing stories. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone online for joining us. We are going to have a little reception outside so you can mingle and speak to the panelists. So thanks so much for coming tonight. Great to see you all. Thanks.